special breaking news coverage of the International Criminal Court, the ICC at The Hague, issuing arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes committed in the Gaza Strip. The court also issued an arrest warrant for Hamas leader Mohammed Deif, who Israel says it killed back in July. The ICC accuses Netanyahu and Gallant of war crimes, including using starvation as a method of warfare and crimes against humanity, such as murder, persecution and inhumane acts. The court says Netanyahu and Gallant knowingly deprived Gaza's civilian population of food, water, medicine and fuel. It also says that by preventing humanitarian assistance, Israel failed to fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law. U.S. Senate Republican Lindsey Graham has condemned the court's decision, calling it the International Corrupt Criminal Court. He says the court has acted in the most absurd and irresponsible manner possible. He went on to say that the court is a dangerous joke. It is now time for the U.S. Senate, he says, to act and sanction this irresponsible body. And he called on Democrat Chuck Schumer to pass bipartisan legislation sanctioning the court. While the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, has been reacting to the ICC decision, he says the arrest warrants will be binding in all EU member states.
The decision of the court has to be respected and implemented. So I take note of the decision of the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants from Prime Minister Netanyahu, the former Minister of Defence, Mr. Gallant, and the Hamas leaders, Deif. This decision is a binding decision, and all states parties of the court, which include all members of the European Union, are binding to implement this court decision.
Let's bring in our senior political analyst now, Marwan Bishara, who's live here in Doha. Marwan, you've heard some of the reactions out of the U.S. You heard Borrell's reaction there. What do you make of this?
Folly, it's a very important thing that we just heard, both from the Americans and the Europeans. And it's really indispensable to understand what we are facing. I think, first and foremost, we need to juxtaposition the American position with the European position. Because I think moving forward, especially after January 20th, when Trump takes over, I think the contrast between Washington and Brussels is going to be huge. And I think the Europeans, despite their unconditional support, or some of them, despite their Germany, for example, and the UK's support for Israel, but Europe at large will not disrespect, will not undermine the ICC, the International Criminal Court, or the ICJ. They will not. They respect them, they value them, and they will demand that everyone else does the same. This is going to be contrasted with the American position, whether under Biden or under Trump, especially with Congress being headed by Republicans, that they're going to try to undermine the world courts, whether it's ICJ or ICC. And they're going to probably, I would say, especially under the Republicans, try to sanction the court officials and judges and so on and so forth. But I think it's very important to watch out whether the Europeans will stand for their beliefs in the international justice here. Why is this important? Because I think we're going to come to a showdown, there's no doubt about it, on other issues perhaps, trade, security, this and that, between Washington and Europe, between America and Europe moving forward. And this might be the test of European resolve and whether they do stand for international justice or not.
Important that this is indeed a test for some of these countries like Germany, who've been supporting Israel, or the United States, who've been giving unconditional support to the Israelis in this war on Gaza. The Israeli reaction, Marwan, came in very quickly. It was a very furious reaction, and we heard accusations of anti-Semitism by some Israeli leaders, as is often the case when they're accused of committing crimes. What do you think their response might be now?
Quickly on your very last point, The thing here is that Germany can still say, I stand by Israel, if they could still claim that. While at the same time saying, look, justice has to be carried out regarding the leaders of Israel, which is different. Because Netanyahu, even domestically, locally, internally, in Israel, is facing corruption charges, and he's supposed to be indicted this week, and he's going to be facing trial this week, right? So it's okay for leaders to be facing trial while you stand by their country. Israelis consider their country wonderful and democracy and so on and so forth, but its leaders go on trial. So Germany and other European powers could stand for justice, international justice, could remain allies of Israel, while at the same time accepting the ICC ruling. Having said all of that, I think Israel now is boxed in, and I think it's cornered, and I think the Netanyahu government probably will feel the heat. It's already felt the heat. Anyone who followed what has gone on in Israel the past several weeks and months knows that Netanyahu has been frantic about the possibility, the potential of him being potentially indicted by the ICC. And that's why there was a lot of pressure by Israel and its allies against the ICC for it not to carry on with this. But now we have a decision. It's a monumental decision. It's hugely important. And clearly, Israel is going to have to reckon with this, what to do. The first reaction, of course, is calling the ICC anti-Semitic, which I am very happy to hear. Not because ICC is anti-Semitic, because now we know that when you call each and everyone and everybody anti-Semitic, nobody is anti-Semitic, really, in the end of the day. If that's how Israel wants to treat the ICC, which is, of course, totally unfair. Now, be that as it may, I think the Israelis now are going to try to coalesce in terms of the government around Netanyahu, but the Israeli public will slowly but surely say, look, enough is enough. We need to open a new page. We're already almost turning a page on Gaza. We need the so-called hostage deal. And I think Netanyahu proved incapable of achieving that. He's actually sinking in another war in Lebanon or in Lebanon.
Right.
So I think definitely Israel needs a better leader, a more honest leader, a leader that is less of a liar, less of a pathological liar, less corrupt than Netanyahu, and certainly less of a war criminal than Netanyahu. So I think this might be an opportunity for the Israelis to move forward and for Netanyahu to stand on trial. As we've heard from the president of the former president of the ICC, he will have a good trial. I'll tell you why this is important for you. That's my last point. You know, his government just rounded up some 10,000 and more Palestinians and threw them in jail. And a lot of them are getting tortured, as we hear from Israeli and other civil society outfits. Those Palestinians, the thousands of them in Israeli prisons, they will not have a fair trial. Netanyahu could have a fair trial. Gallant could have a fair trial. That's why they must be arrested if they appear in any one of those 120 plus countries, because at least they will have a fair trial. But the thousands upon thousands, the 1 million Palestinians that have been detained since 1967 did not enjoy a fair trial in Israel.
Marwan, just one last question before we let you go, and it's about the PA, the Palestinian Authority. I had Josep Borrell a short while ago, the former Israeli Justice Minister, saying that this was perhaps an opportunity for the PA, the Palestinian Authority, to step up, and that they had been, in fact, working behind the scenes to ensure that there was justice for Palestinians at the international levels, that they had been pushing for these arrest warrants to be issued against Israeli leaders. What opportunity does this create for the PA today?
Well, to be honest about the PA, despite its backseat driving, as it were, and its incapacity to wake up and really face the challenge of genocide, despite all of that, it has, in fact, tried its best throughout the past months and years. So there's nothing for the PA to do now that it has not done in the past year. I mean, it has done everything possible in the international arena, in the United Nations, at the UN Security Council, and so on and so forth. It hasn't done much locally, domestically, in the West Bank, But in terms of what it needs to do, it has done more than enough. The problem with the Israeli center and center-right and center-left is that every time they have a problem, they either blame the Palestinians or they ask more of the Palestinians, as if the Palestinians have not done enough. What the PA has demanded, like what Hamas has fought for, like what most Palestinians stand for, more than anything else, is justice. That's what they want. They want justice. This ruling will not heal the wounded. It will not feed the hungry in Gaza. It will not bring back the homes. It will not bring back the parents to the orphan children. But it could bring justice. It's the beginning of a long pathway to justice. Palestinians, and anyone knows the Palestinians, knows that that's what they want more than anything else. More than food and medicine, more than shelter. They want justice. And if the International Criminal Court can provide them justice, that's more than enough than that will heal their wound more than anything else. Because the wound that they suffer most is in the spirit, is in the fact that they have been neglected by the international community, that the United Nations have been unable to do much for them as their tormentor continue to sadistically torture them nonstop. So at least now we see the beginning of a light, that we get a glimmer of something, that at least those tormentors, the Israeli tormentors, could now face trial. And if they're not, at least the trial of public opinion probably is going to be no less important on the moral question of the day.
Marwan, thank you very much. The beginning of a long path to justice, as you say. Marwan Bishara, senior political analyst.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.